I want to start with something that happens in kitchens. You're making coffee. The mug is on the counter. Your elbow catches it. It falls. It hits the floor and shatters. Ceramic pieces everywhere. Coffee spreading across the tile. Now, here's the thing I want you to notice. You have never, not once in your entire life, watched the reverse happen. You have never seen coffee spontaneously leap off the floor, collect itself into a mug shape, and fly upward onto the counter, leaving the floor dry and the mug intact. That's funny to even say, right? Of course, that doesn't happen. Everyone knows that doesn't happen. But here's what's remarkable. If you filmed the falling mug and ran the film backward, the physics would look almost right. The trajectory is a valid solution to Newton's music equations. The pieces reassembling is at the level of individual atoms bouncing off each other. Not a violation of any fundamental force law. Gravity works the same forward and backward. Electromagnetism works the same forward and backward. So why doesn't the music reverse happen? The answer is the second law of thermodynamics. And it is music, in my opinion, one of the most profound and most underappreciated facts about the universe. Not just music for what it says about coffee cups, for what it says about time, about causation, about the structure of physical reality at every scale. And when you really work through what the second law says, when you follow it to where it actually leads, it turns out to say something very specific about God, not what God can or cannot do in some philosophical debate, something much more concrete. It says that the universe we actually live in, the one governed by this law, the one where broken cups stay broken, is a universe in which the specific defined properties of the God that religion describes are not just unobserved, they are physically incoherent. Let me show you how, starting with the cup. Now, I'm going to set up what I'm going to do, 'cause I think it's important to be precise about this. I'm not going to argue that God doesn't exist because music science has explained a lot of stuff. That's a popular argument, and it's not wrong exactly, but it's not what I find most interesting. What I'm going to argue is more specific. I'm going to take the actual music-specific properties that theology assigns to God: omnipotence, omniscience, being outside of time, being the cause music of the universe, and show you that second law of thermodynamics and its consequences make each of those properties physically incoherent when examined carefully. Not hard to believe, incoherent, internally contradictory in music, the way that a square circle is incoherent. 4 arguments, all of them start from the broken coffee cup. Let's go. Let me explain the second law properly first, because everything else depends on it. The second law says that in any closed system, any system that isn't having energy pumped into it from outside, entropy music never decreases. It either stays the same or it increases. Entropy is a measure of disorder. More precisely, it's a measure of how many microscopic arrangements of a system are consistent with its macroscopic appearance. The intact coffee mug has very few possible arrangements of its atoms consistent with intact coffee mug. The shattered pieces on the floor have an enormous number of possible arrangements consistent with broken pieces on the floor. So, the shattered state has vastly higher entropy. The reason the cup goes from intact to broken, and never from broken to intact, is that there are so many more ways to be broken than to be intact. The direction music of time past to future is the direction of increasing entropy. The cup falls into a vast statistical space of disordered states music, and can essentially never find its way back to the tiny statistical island of ordered states it came from. This isn't a law like a speed limit, music something imposed that could have been otherwise. It's a statistical fact so overwhelming that it functions like a law. The probability of spontaneous entropy reversal in any macroscopic system is not zero. It is 1 divided by a number with more digits than there are atoms in the observable universe. Now God answers prayers, God heals the sick, God intervenes in history, God reverses outcomes that would otherwise occur. Every single one of those actions, if they happen in the physical world, involves a local decrease in entropy. A tumor dissolving is a highly ordered biological process running in reverse, entropy decreasing. A person surviving when they shouldn't have is the physical system of that person's body finding its way back to a low entropy ordered state against the statistical tide. If God regularly intervenes in the physical world, we should see systematic, detectable violations of the second law at the sites of those interventions. Music, we have never detected them, not once in any study under any conditions. Every miracle claim, when examined carefully with instrumentation, either dissolves into natural explanation or retreats into unfalsifiability. No study of intercessory prayer has ever found statistically significant entropy violation. An omnipotent God who intervenes in the physical world leaves thermodynamic fingerprints. We have the instruments to detect those fingerprints. They, music, are not there. Either God doesn't intervene in the physical world, in which case he is for all practical purposes absent, or the intervention is indistinguishable from statistical noise, in which case the concept does music no explanatory work. In physics, a variable that makes no detectable difference gets removed from the equation. Here's the part that I think is genuinely beautiful and genuinely devastating at the same time. The broken coffee cup doesn't just demonstrate music, the second law. It demonstrates the arrow of time, because here's the thing. If you write down the fundamental equations of physics, quantum mechanics, general relativity, electromagnetism, almost all of them are time-symmetric. Run them forward, they give valid physics. Run them backward, they give equally valid physics. At the microscopic level, there is essentially no preferred direction of time built into the laws. A single electron bouncing off a single proton looks the same whether you watch the film, music, forward or backward. The arrow of time, the fact that the past is different from the future, that broken cups don't reassemble, that we can remember yesterday but not tomorrow, that asymmetry doesn't come from fundamental laws. It emerges from entropy, from the statistical fact that there are overwhelmingly more disordered states than ordered ones. So systems evolve toward disorder simply by exploring their available states. Time is emergent. It arises from thermodynamics. It is not a fundamental feature of the universe. It's a consequence of the second law. Now, every sophisticated theology I've encountered describes God as existing outside of time, eternal, not bound by temporal sequence. Music, the divine perspective, sees all of time simultaneously, music past, present, future, without being located in any of them. I want to take that seriously because I think it's actually trying to point at something real. But follow the implications carefully. If God exists outside of time, if God is not located in any temporal moment, then God cannot be in a causal relationship with anything inside time. Causation requires sequence. A cause must precede its effect. Before and after must have meaning for causation to occur. If you're outside of time, if there is no before and after music from your perspective, then you cannot cause anything. God created the universe is a causal statement. It implies that first there was no universe, and then God acted music, and then there was a universe. That sequence requires time. The God outside of time cannot cause the universe to exist music, because causation is a temporal relationship, and God has no temporal location. The standard theological response is that God's causation is not like ordinary causation. It's a different kind of causation appropriate to an eternal being. This is where I get stuck. When you tell me that causation music in this context doesn't mean what causation means, that it's a special undefined non-temporal causation that we have no example of and no framework for, then you've removed the content from the statement. God created the universe without announcing that you've done so. God created the universe using timeless non-causal causation is not an explanation. It is a sentence that has the grammatical form of an explanation, while containing none of the structural features that make explanations work. The broken coffee cup tells us what time is. It's the direction entropy increases. A God outside of time is a God outside of that direction. And a God outside of that direction is a God who cannot cause things within it. We've established that God's interventions leave no thermodynamic fingerprints, and that a God outside of time cannot be a cause. The next two arguments go somewhere I find even more surprising. One concerns the most mysterious feature of the Big Bang. The other concerns what happens when an omniscient mind tries to operate inside thermodynamic reality. Subscribe back in 30 seconds. Here is the deepest problem in the whole discussion. The one I think gets talked about least, and it cuts directly against the most popular argument for God. The argument that the universe must have had a creator because it had a beginning. The second law tells us entropy increases. For entropy to be increasing now, it must have been lower in the past. Go back far enough to the Big Bang when the universe was in a state of extraordinarily, almost incomprehensibly low entropy. This is the past hypothesis, and it is genuinely strange. Think about it this way. The universe at the Big Bang was not just hot and dense. It was fantastically, absurdly ordered. The music, matter, and energy were distributed in an almost perfectly uniform way with tiny fluctuations. Yes, but uniform enough that the entropy was colossally lower than it is music today. Even though today's universe has structure, stars, galaxies, planets, music that looks ordered to us. Why was the entropy so low at the beginning? This is a real open question in physics. I'm not music pretending it's solved. It's not. It's one of the things I'd most like to understand, but here's what I want to focus on. This low entropy initial state is often presented as evidence for God. The universe began in a special and probable ordered state that looks designed. Design implies a designer. But follow the argument more carefully. If God created the universe, God chose the initial conditions. Out of all possible initial states God could have selected, God chose one with extraordinarily low entropy. Why? The theological answer is because low entropy was necessary for the universe to develop complexity, stars, planets, and eventually life. God set up the initial conditions to allow the universe to unfold in life-permitting ways. But here's the problem. The low entropy of the Big Bang is not the minimum entropy state a universe could start in. It's low compared to now, but it's not the lowest possible. God could have created a universe that started even more ordered, a universe that generated even more complexity and structure over its lifetime. Or God could have created a universe that started in a maximum entropy state. A universe that was already in thermal equilibrium, music with no arrow of time, no complexity, no life, a featureless uniform soup. That's an equally valid option for an omnipotent creator. Why this specific entropy? Why not higher? Why not lower? The God hypothesis doesn't answer the question of why the entropy was what it was. It just moves the mystery one level up. Now you have to explain why God chose this entropy rather than any other. Natural explanations, quantum cosmology, eternal inflation, the many-world structure at least commit to specific mechanisms that could in principle make testable predictions about what kind of initial conditions are more likely. They engage with the question God chose it as a non-answer dressed up as an answer. And there's something deeper here that I think about a lot. The low entropy of the Big Bang is music, the reason we can remember the past but not the future. It's why causation runs forward. It's why we age in one direction. It's why the coffee cup falls and doesn't reassemble. All of that, all of the structure of time as we experience it traces back to this one, music, initial condition. One fact about the state of the universe 8 billion years ago. If that initial condition has a natural explanation, something in the mathematics of quantum gravity that makes low entropy beginnings more probable, or something about the structure of multiverse, then we have a complete physical account of why time has a direction. If the initial condition was chosen by God, we have a mystery plus a label for the mystery. I'll take the incomplete natural account over the complete sounding label any day, because the incomplete account is pointing somewhere. The label is just standing still. In 1867, the physicist James Clerk Maxwell proposed a thought experiment that bothered physicists for almost 100 years. Imagine a box divided into two halves by a partition. The box is filled with gas. Some molecules are moving fast, they're hot. Some are moving slowly, they're cool. Music on average, both halves of the box are the same temperature. Now, imagine a tiny demon sitting at a small door in the partition. The demon watches each molecule as it approaches. When a fast molecule comes from the left, the demon opens the door and lets it pass to the right. When a slow molecule comes from the right, the demon opens the door and lets it pass to the left. Over time, all the fast molecules end up on the right side. All the slow molecules end up on the left. One side is hot, one side is cold. You've created a temperature difference from equilibrium, and the temperature difference can be used to run an engine and do work. The demon has sorted the molecules without doing any mechanical work on the gas. It seems to have decreased the entropy of the system without paying any thermodynamic cost. For decades, no one could figure out what was wrong with this. The second law seems to be violated. In the 1960s, the physicist Rolf Landau figured it out, and later Charles Bennett completed the argument. The demon has to observe each molecule to record what it observes to make a decision, and crucially at some point to erase its memory to make room for new observations. Erasing information, Landau showed, is not a free operation. Erasing one bit of information necessarily generates a minimum amount of heat. The thermodynamic cost of the demon's information processing, specifically the cost of erasing its memory, exactly music, compensates for the entropy reduction it achieves in the gas. The second law, music, is preserved, but it's preserved because information processing has a thermodynamic cost. Acquiring knowledge, storing it, and erasing it are physical processes, music, that generate entropy. This is now called Landau's principle. It's music been experimentally confirmed. Now I want to apply this to omniscience. An omniscient God knows everything. Every particle in the universe, its position and momentum, every thought in every mind, every event in the past, present, and future, and essentially infinite amount of information, music, simultaneously held, continuously updated as the universe evolves. By Landau's principle, the acquisition and processing of information generates entropy. A mind that knows one bit more than it did knows it, because some physical process occurred, and that process generated heat. An omniscient God, a mind processing information about every particle in the universe simultaneously would operating under the thermodynamic framework that governs everything we've ever observed be generating entropy at an absolutely incomprehensible rate. Where is that entropy going? We don't see any evidence of it. Now, the standard response: God is non-physical. God's information processing doesn't obey Landau's principle because God doesn't operate on physical substrates. Fair enough, but then how does God interact with the physical universe? How does God know what's happening music in the physical universe if God's awareness of it doesn't involve any physical process? You're back to the interaction problem. A non-physical mind knowing physical facts requires some causal connection between the physical and the non-physical. That connection, if it exists, involves physical processes. Those processes obey thermodynamics. Either God's omniscience is physically implemented, in which case it generates entropy we should detect, or it has no physical implementation, music, in which case it has no physical effect. And omniscience is a label, not a property. Maxwell's demon turns out to be one of the most illuminating thought experiments in physics. And what it illuminates when applied to theology is that knowing everything has a cost. Music, a cost that an omniscient God has apparently never paid. I want to be honest about something. The 4 arguments I've just made about thermodynamic fingerprints, music, about causation and time, about the initial entropy, about Landau's music principle, they all converge on the same place. The universe we actually live in, governed by the second law, has no room for the specific God that religion describes. Not because God is philosophically unappealing, because the God concept, when made precise placed inside thermodynamic reality, generates contradictions. And when I worked through this, really worked through it, not just listed the arguments, I noted something that took me by surprise. The thing that bothers me most is not the conclusion. The conclusion follows from the physics. I've learned to be comfortable with conclusions that follow from physics, even when they're strange. What bothers me is a more specific thing. The broken coffee cup stays music broken, not as a metaphor, literally. Once entropy has increased, once the cup has shattered, once the moment has passed, once the person has died, the thermodynamic arrow has moved and it does not move back. The configuration is gone, irreversibly. People grieve this. People have always grieved this. The irreversibility of loss is one of the deepest sources of human pain. And religion's most powerful promise, music, is that irreversibility is not the final word, that something reverses it, that the broken things are eventually made whole. I can't give you that. The physics says the cup stays, music, broken. The physics says entropy increases. The physics says the arrow of time does not reverse. What I can give you is this. The reason the cup's breaking is irreversible is the same reason that anything ever happened at all. Although entropy of the past is the reason there is a direction to time, the direction of time is the reason there is change. Change is the reason there is life, thought, love, beauty, any of it. The irreversibility is not a flaw in the universe. It is the mechanism of everything that makes the universe interesting. The cup breaks, and that's what time is. And time is what made the cup music, and the coffee, and the morning, and the person drinking it possible in the first place. I find that more honest, and in a strange way more beautiful than the alternative. Here's something I've come to think is genuinely underappreciated. The second law is usually presented as the law of decay. Things fall apart. Order dissolves into disorder. The universe runs down toward heat death, and that's true, but it's only half the picture. The other half is this. Music, the entropy gradient. The fact that the universe started low and has been climbing is what drives music everything. Every process that creates order locally, that builds structure, that generates complexity. Every one of those processes is powered by the flow of entropy from somewhere low to somewhere high. Stars burn because they're high entropy furnaces radiating heat into low entropy space. Life exists because it couples to that flow. We eat ordered food, burn it metabolically, and excrete high entropy waste. The entropy gradient is the fuel. Your brain music, right now thinking about this, is a structure of extraordinary local order maintained by that flow. You're a low entropy island in a rising entropy, see temporarily sustained by the gradient. The same second law that breaks coffee cups is the law that built you. And here's what I find genuinely wonderful about that. It means the universe didn't need to be set up by anyone to be capable of generating complexity in life. The initial low entropy, whatever its origin, automatically generates the conditions for everything interesting to happen just by increasing the complexity. Isn't a special gift inserted from outside. It's the natural downstream consequence of the entropy gradient working itself out. The universe is not a machine that needed a designer. It's a thermodynamic system that spontaneously generates structure as entropy flows from low to high. Life is not a miracle. It's what happens when you have enough thermodynamic gradient, enough chemistry, and enough time. God was supposed to explain how the complex things got here. The second law explains it better, not by answering a question differently, but by dissolving the assumption that the question had only one possible answer. The question was, who built the complex things? The second law's answer, nothing built them. The gradient built them. Entropy built them. The universe built them out of itself using nothing but physics. The broken coffee cup never reassembles. I've been circling around that fact this whole time, and I want to end with it, because I think it's the most important thing the second law tells us. Not about God, about being alive. Every moment that passes has passed irreversibly. The entropy has increased. The configuration has gone. The thermodynamic arrow has moved. That means every moment, every single one is happening for the first and only time. The specific arrangement of matter and energy that constitutes this moment will never recur. The probability of it recurring spontaneously is so small that it might as well be called zero. This is what makes moments precious, not their longevity, their unrepeatability. You are a temporary low entropy configuration in a universe of rising entropy. You will last for a while, decades if things go well, and in that time you will be arranged in ways that allow you to observe, to think, to feel, to music remember, to imagine. That is an extraordinary thing to be not despite the second law. Because of it, the cup breaks, the entropy increases, the moment passes, and then there is a next moment equally unrepeatable, equally precise, equally yours. I don't need the cup music to reassemble. I don't need the arrow to reverse. I don't need the irreversibility to be undone by something outside the physics. The physics is enough. It has always been enough. The broken cup on the floor is not a tragedy interrupted by the possibility of miracle. It is the universe telling you in the clearest physical terms available that this moment, this exact, specific, irreplaceable moment, music is happening now. And now is the only time it ever